Okay, welcome everyone. Let's start. Welcome on this webinar, Finding European Buyers for Your Natural Ingredients for Cosmetics. Some house rules. We cannot see or hear you. You can ask your questions using the Questions tab at the right of your screen in the menu. We will answer a selection of the questions. There will be a recording of this session, and it will be published on our website, and will also be sent to you if you are registered for this webinar. We will also share the presentation. At the end of the webinar, you get a short survey, so please fill it out, and we know how you've appreciated this webinar and what we can do better maybe. Today we have two presenters. Both are very experienced in natural ingredients for cosmetics sector. We have Andrew Jones and John Rebner. They will introduce themselves once they start their own presentation. The agenda for today is that I will start with a opening remarks and an introduction of CBI, a brief introduction. And then Andrew will start his presentation about market requirements, about sustainability and traceability in the supply chain, and how to find European buyers. And after Andrew's part, John will pick up, and he will talk about his experience and examples of sourcing. We'll finish with answering the questions that you can ask via the questions tab. So again, during the whole presentation, you can just type your questions, and at the end we will go through them and answer hopefully many of them. A short, brief introduction on CBI. CBI is the Center for the Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries. We are funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands. And our mission is to support the transition towards inclusive and sustainable economies. We strengthen the social, economic and environmental sustainability of SMEs in developing countries by connecting them to European and regional markets. So with that work, we promote and create decent jobs, and we pay special attention to women and youth. And we stimulate sustainable production and trade. Nowadays, the countries we can start new projects in and we can work in are defined by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And nowadays we work mostly in African countries, Middle East and Asian countries. We are active in 13 sectors at the moment. These are the sectors. And of course, today is about natural ingredients for cosmetics. But we're also active in natural ingredients for health products and in natural food additives. There are two important pillars of CBI. These are the projects. The first pillar is the projects. We identify economic opportunities for local SMEs on international markets. And in our projects, we help SMEs and business support organizations to enter these markets. So you can go to our website, cbi.eu, and then /projects, and you can see what current projects we have, and also if there are new projects in your country. So at the moment, these are active projects in the natural ingredients sector that are on our website. So if you go to this website, you can check the information and view the details. And the second important pillar is our market information. We make market information available for small, medium enterprises in developing countries, and we focus on export to Europe of products and services in the focus sectors I just showed. The studies answer questions such as which countries offer the most opportunities for your product, what channels should you use to enter the market in your sector, and what laws and requirements must you follow. That's also the things that Andrew and John will talk about today. So please visit the cbi.eu/market information and go to the sector natural ingredients for cosmetics, and you'll find all kind of market studies that can help you. I will now give the floor to Andrew, and he will pick up, will go through his presentation. I'll make you a presenter, Andrew.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, Thomas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to all of you on this webinar today. Looking at the list of attendees, I do recognize a few of you, which is really great. So to you and also to everyone, thanks for being here. So yes, as Thomas has mentioned, we're going to be talking today about buyers' requirements for natural ingredients, and John and myself will cover. John has the experience of working for a company, and my experiences as a consultant since 2004. So my bio is, well, I've got a background. I was a food scientist originally in 1984, and then I had an MBA in 2003. But since 2004, I have had my own company specializing in coaching and training SME companies to be successful exporters of ingredients for cosmetics to the European Union, and with a special focus on new and innovative ingredients. So I've worked with various clients in that time, especially CBI, of course, and then SIPO and Swiss Contact, UNIDO, UNCTAD, and others. Before I became a consultant, I worked for the Body Shop International for 9 years. Worked in their community trade program, sourcing really interesting ingredients from really interesting communities around the world, but with a special focus in my case in West Africa, Southern Africa, and then Asia and South America. I've worked in various countries, as you can see there, and I'm now currently living in Colombia. So we've had the agenda for today. I'm going to be covering market requirements, sustainability, and how to find European buyers. And then John will give us his own personal experiences with some more details as well. And then we'll have some questions, and then we'll finish at 3:30 European time. In 20 minutes, it's a lot to cover, though I have condensed it down quite a lot. So here we start up with the first part, which is about market requirements for cosmetic ingredients. And the key word in the European market is safety, safety of ingredients and safety of final product. There's a priority. Whether we're talking about a vegetable oil, an essential oil, any ingredient, it's really important that there is a close attention to the safety in use. In other words, what's the maximum concentration that can be safely used in a cosmetic product. As a supplier, the key requirement is for you to have a detailed understanding and knowledge of the composition, 100% of the composition of your ingredient, the safety of your ingredient, and in some cases its efficacy in relation to the benefits or the claims regarding that ingredient. And you might think that, well, I'm only supplying a vegetable oil, but actually it is still important. The requirements are for you to specify what is the safety. Even if it is actually safe, you have to declare the safety in your documentation. And the good thing is, when you can describe your ingredient in such terms, then you are selling a high-value cosmetic ingredient rather than a low-value raw material. And the objective of the work we do with CBI is to work with companies to create high-value cosmetic ingredients and not raw materials. And when you have this high-value cosmetic ingredient, then your customer and the customer's customer, who probably is the manufacturer, will just know more about the safe concentrations to use that ingredient to achieve the desired effect in the final product. I've already hinted at the basic types of natural cosmetic ingredient. There are vegetable oils, essential oils, and other plant extracts. I did a bit of research recently, well, you see there, on the 16th of November, I had a look at COSING, which is the register of the inky ingredients, but it's kind of managed by the European Commission. I looked at different natural ingredient categories: vegetable oils and derivatives, vegetable butters and their derivatives, essential oils from flowers, flower extracts, seed extracts, waxes and derivatives. And that's just a selection of what I assumed would be more or less natural ingredients. And we look at numbers, you got more than 600 vegetable oils and their derivatives, of course, not forgetting the derivatives. Then you've got vegetable butters, essential oils, 243 essential oils, plus another 86 from flowers, 467 flower extracts, nearly 400 seed extracts, and more than 200 waxes and derivatives. So we're looking at more than 2,000 natural ingredients and their derivatives listed already in the COSING. So there's quite a few. So often and what's the purpose of this slide? Well, it's to show that often we think about a narrow range of ingredients, when in fact there are very many options and alternatives available to the suppliers of natural ingredients. Now, here is a quick description of what is a vegetable oil and butter. They are a key component of cosmetic products. They provide moisturization, and they go into body cream emulsions to make body creams and face creams. And they're also the starting materials for soap and soap-like ingredients, and that's hence the derivatives. All oils and butters have a similar structure. They're all comprised of triglycerides or fatty acids, and different oils have different compositions. And so that's how we understand how different oils will perform differently in cosmetics based on their fatty acid profile. Hence, fatty acids are a very key criteria or characteristic to be able to describe to your cosmetic ingredient buyer. Essential oils, well, they're natural plant extracts. They are complex substances with many hundreds of different chemicals, and they're known for not just their fragrance, but they have sort of emotional, and they affect mood, and they also have antibacterial properties, although you can't always claim that on the label. They are powerful chemicals, and some of them can cause very serious health problems. So these are not safe ingredients. These are hazardous materials, and you need to handle them carefully. And so then you the third category, everything else that's extracted from a plant. So these are typically active components from which you can make claims like anti-aging, reduction of wrinkles, hydration, soothing, those kinds of claims. And there are many hundreds of plants that have cosmetic properties, and there are still many more to be found and developed. The challenge is that most non-food plants are toxic, and so there is a concern about the safety of these ingredients, these extracts, and how much you can safely use in a cosmetic. So you will need to have safety studies to determine the safe concentrations of these ingredients. And there are, in fact, every year where we have these three types, you get more introductions of plant extracts into the cosmetic industry than you do for the other types of ingredient. Now, before we go into this section on the regulation and other aspects, we'd just like to carry out a short poll to get to know a bit more about who you are. So I've got here 3 questions, and if you could all just respond, we can get to see who's in the room with us today. The first question is about who you work for, what type of organization. The second one is, are you selling already ingredients to the European cosmetic industry? And if you do, what ingredients do you sell? So I'll put these polls up now. Just give you a short time to actually answer the question. And then when that's done, we'll put the next question up. So please select one of those, whether you're a BSO, a business support organization in Europe or outside Europe, or whether you're in the cosmetic industry in Europe or outside Europe, or in fact, perhaps you're not in the cosmetic industry, perhaps you're here to find out about whether the cosmetics industry is for you. So please complete that poll. So you've got now 53% of you have voted already, so want to get to like 100 if we can before we move to the next poll. 66%. Okay, that's 75% of you. Okay. Any increase? Okay, so I'm gonna close. Let's wait a bit longer. Another 10 seconds. 10 seconds, and then we'll close the poll. Okay. Thank you for that. Then I will have the next one about selling ingredients. Here we go. Okay, we're up to 70%, so another 15 seconds to go. And let's see what the results are. Okay, so let me share the results of that one. Let's do the third question first. Which ingredients do you sell? You got a choice of vegetable oils, essential oils, plant extracts, all of the above, or none of the above. Okay, another 10 seconds to go on that one. Okay, great, thank you for doing that. So let's look at the results. So here we have organizations. So in the room, we have companies in the cosmetics industry outside Europe, 27%, followed by not in the industry, 25%, followed by 24% a BSO based outside Europe, 15% BSOs in Europe, and 9% of you are a cosmetics company in Europe. Okay, that's very, so the majority of you are in the cosmetics industry outside Europe. Great, that's good to know. Let's go to the second question. Do you sell ingredients? So 47% of you don't sell ingredients, 27% do, and 26% not applicable. Okay. And then which types of ingredients? So for those 27%, let's have a look. We've got the majority of you, 42%, okay, not of us, that's okay. So of the ingredients, 23% essential oils, 10% vegetable oils, 10% plant extracts, 14% of you sell all of the above, and 42% none of the above. Okay, so that's a very interesting mix of companies actually. So and the majority of you who sell the ingredients are actually selling essential oils. That's great. Okay, very good. Thank you for that. So that gives us an idea of who's in the room with us today. There are like 108 people here. So hide the results and then move on to the next slide. So I'm going to look at the different aspects of the key regulation. So the first piece that you need to be familiar with is the cosmetics regulation 1223/2009. It's the primary regulation for cosmetic products for the EU market. There isn't any regulation for the ingredients specifically. It's built in within the cosmetics regulation. And it's a very straightforward piece of legislation to read, really. The recommendation is for ingredient suppliers to focus on Chapter 4 of this regulation and annexes 1 to 6, and I'm going to go through those right now. Of course, for those of you operating or interested in the UK, there is the UK cosmetics regulation, which is actually very similar, almost a mirror image of the European, the EU regulation. You can find out more about that one by going to the website of the CTPA, Cosmetics, Toiletries and Perfumery Association. That link there would take you to that website. I'm going to start with Annex 2, not Annex 1. Annex 2 is prohibited substances. There's an Annex 2 is a list of the ingredients that must not be contained within a cosmetic product. So especially when you're looking at new plant extracts, this is a really key annex to look at first. Right now, there are, as of the 28th of November, there are 1,694 prohibited substances. And of course, it's important to note that some of these may be found as contaminants in other legally permitted substances. So you think, well, my extract is not in that annex, great. But what about heavy metals? What about certain pesticides? Are they within my substance as a contaminant? So yeah, so for example, you might have cold pressed unrefined sesame seed oil, very safe ingredient, but it might contain lead. Lead is a prohibited ingredient. Together with other prohibited other heavy metals, and consequently a buyer may be unwilling to purchase your vegetable oil because the manufacturer may be unable to use it in their cosmetic product if they're unable to remove the contaminant. And there is a section in the regulation that allows for unavoidable contaminants, but this is only unavoidable having taken a lot of effort to do your utmost to remove that unavoidable contaminant from your substance. So very important to look at that Annex 2, study it, and it's updated regularly to see when you're starting something new or when you're checking on contamination in your ingredient. Annex 3 is the restricted substances. So there are 324 restricted substances as of the end of November, and they mustn't be used in cosmetics subject to certain restrictions. So, for example, in the case of essential oils, and there are many of you in the room with essential oils, they contain 26, or they may contain up to 26 known allergens. These allergens, you will find them in Annex 3. So if you're producing black pepper essential oil or nutmeg essential oil or citrus oil, it's highly likely that it will contain, for example, D-limonene. D-limonene is one of the known 26 allergens in fragrances. So you'll find it in Annex 3, and it will say in Annex 3, the presence of this substance must be indicated in the list of ingredients when its concentration exceeds 0.001 in leave-on or 0.001 in rinse-off products. And so it's that's an example of a restricted ingredient. Again, it's useful to refer to that when you're supplying an ingredient. And there are other types of restriction. That one refers to maximum concentration before you have to put it onto the label. Okay, but there are others, including the type of product, if it's a hair dye or a nail product, the part of the body where the ingredient will be used, and the maximum concentration. Annexes 4, 5, and 6 refer to lists of permitted colors, permitted preservatives, and permitted UV filters. So if your ingredient has properties like this, and it's not included on the list, then it cannot be used for those purposes because it's not on the annex. To a natural color, for example, that's not included in Annex 4 cannot be used as a colorant. You have to make an application, submit a scientific dossier on the safety of the ingredient. You have to submit to a particular committee in the European Commission, and that's expensive. That might be in excess of 100,000 euros to get your natural ingredient color or your natural preservative onto that annex. The numbers of chemicals and substances in these annexes don't change very often for that reason. Now, we come back to Annex 1. This is, Annex 1 is all about the cosmetic product safety report, the CPSR, that the manufacturer has to prepare to submit to the authorities as part of the notification process of their selling a cosmetic product in Europe. So your data will be included in that report that the manufacturer has to submit. This is then the immediate kind of first guide for you to look at what are the requirements. So there are certain technical documentation identified in Annex 1, for example, the identity of the substance, the physical and chemical characteristics of the substance or mixture, the microbiological specifications of the substance, the purity, and in cases of prohibited substances, evidence for their technical unavoidability, as I mentioned earlier. So that's the legal requirements specified in that technical report that the manufacturer has to submit. There's also a section on the toxicological profile of a substance, and therefore there's a particular emphasis on understanding skin and eye irritation, skin sensitization, and, for example, in the case of UV absorption, photo-induced toxicity. So, especially in the case of a new plant extract, you will need to include that data. The second key legislation that you need to be familiar with is REACH, the registration, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of chemicals. So REACH, aims to ensure a high level of protection of human health and the environment, including the promotion of alternative methods, i.e. not using animals, for assessing hazards of substances. There was also a UK REACH, and you can find out more about that from looking at the website of the Health and Safety Executive of the UK. It is, again, at this stage, almost a mirror image of REACH for the EU. You have to have set up the same systems and mechanisms, and so it's kind of duplicated, but it is a separate piece of legislation, you can't use your EU REACH really to, it doesn't no longer applies for the UK. The basics of REACH, okay, well, EU companies that import or manufacture more than 1 ton of a substance that's not exempt must register with the European Chemicals Agency, or ECHA. And the more volume that is imported or manufactured, the more data is required, and therefore the more expensive the dossier that is to prepare. So what happens is that the dossier is owned by a consortium of companies who share the costs, and that's particularly with a view to sharing the costs of animal testing and reducing the number of animal tests that have to be repeated for the same substance. So while REACH covers all chemical substances, there are exemptions, and vegetable oils are a classic example here of what is exempt because they're generally non-hazardous materials. For those of you with essential oils, they are not exempt from REACH. Now, while this is a mechanism, while this law is particularly aimed at European EU companies, importers and manufacturers, there is a mechanism whereby non-EU companies can register their substances and obtain a REACH registration number via a mechanism known as the only representative. This gives that particular company, that's a non-EU company, gives you commercial advantages. However, the costs to become a member of the consortium and obtain a REACH number can be around 50,000 per substance. One of the key, from a supply perspective, the key outputs from REACH is the safety data sheet. The REACH regulation contains the requirements for safety data sheets. All substances, including natural ingredients for cosmetics, need to have their own safety data sheet. This is not dissimilar to a globally harmonized system in place around the world, where you need a safety data sheet to transport your products from your own manufacturing site across the country and then into export. The third piece of key legislation is the classification, labeling and packaging regulation. This again is the objective is to ensure a high level of protection of health and the environment, as well as the free movement of substances, mixtures and articles. So yeah, this is the legislation for classifying the hazards of your material. And it is derived actually from the globally harmonized system. It puts into law what is presented as the UN globally harmonized system procedures. There is also a GB version of this, very similar to the EU version for those companies targeting the UK market. So yeah, CLP, the UK version, is based on the globally harmonized system. And as I mentioned, many countries have adopted GHS, the UN system, into their own legislation. So this will be familiar to you. And the CLP data is incorporated into different sections of the safety data sheet, and that's the relationship between the CLP and the REACH legislation. One aspect of the European management of the CLP legislation that's of value to non-European companies is that the CLP notifications are published on the European Chemicals Agency website. So you can find out more about what companies are saying about the hazards of their particular substance. You can't just use that yourself, you've got to do your own hazard analysis, but it gives you an idea about what the European importers and manufacturers are declaring about the hazards of particular substances that you may also have. So the three basic documents that you have to provide are the specification, the certificate of analysis, and the safety data sheet. more details about these are given on the CBI website. As mentioned by Thomas, there's an extensive section for all the sectors that CBI works in, and especially also for cosmetic ingredients. And there's a link to how to create a dossier for a cosmetic ingredient, and in there are those requirements. And also then John will be going into some more detail about examples that he has got for his own business. So, and the requirements of Annex 1, going back to the cosmetics regulation, those requirements are the basic requirements for all cosmetic ingredients. And then, of course, particular companies may specify additional requirements or a higher specification. So I wanted to summarize that aspect like this. So there are 3 key elements: cosmetics regulation, REACH regulation, and the CLP regulation. And you have documents like specifications, certificate of analysis, safety data sheet, allergen declaration, IFRA certificates. These primarily come out of these legislations. But you see that the green box is not yet full because there are other things that you will have to provide. So that are related to private standards, that are related to social and environmental responsibility at the ingredient level, for example, halal certification, kosher, organic, fair trade, and then natural, i.e. looking at Natru and Cosmos and ISO 16128, I'm talking a little bit later on, UEBT. So these are coming out of that. Then the box is still not complete. There's still more to go. There is company level, and of course there can be an overlap here between company and ingredient, but for this purposes, you can see that there are, for example, SEDEX, Global Compact, responsible sourcing, and these are private standards related to social and environmental responsibility. But I put in the yellow box there about upcoming plans at the European Union level. There's a European Green Deal to be aware of. There's the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability to be aware of. That will put these things most likely into law. And then the final section is private standards related to quality. So you have documented quality standards, HACCP, which you can adapt for cosmetic ingredients, Codex Alimentarius for those of you who are selling into both the food and the cosmetics industry, ISO 9001, and FC GMP is it's based on ISO 9001. It's been developed by the European Federation for Cosmetic Ingredients, and you can download that GMP document and study it and apply it to your own company. And then finally, GACP, which is a quality standard. At the same time, it's used a lot by organizations as part of the social responsibility, because it will also include other aspects of related to social and environmental responsibility. So that diagram summarizes the areas of the market requirements for you. A small part of it is related to the legal aspects of it, and then there are many other requirements to consider as well.
Just a quick notification on your timings, Andrew. You have about 20 minutes left for your part of the.
Yeah, I will. Catch up. I put this in. But John actually has got some really good examples. So I'm not going to go into great detail with these. These are examples of data in a certificate of analysis or specification for vegetable oils, and equally for essential oils as well. These are similar typical requirements to go into a certificate of analysis, and you can find out more about these on the CBI website. Then plant extracts as well. They will need to put data in there, especially relating to the safe use, the maximum concentration recommended for use in cosmetics. And especially for new plant extracts, you will need to include aspects of toxicology, the skin and eye irritation, skin sensitization, etc. as well as efficacy studies and other data to complete the safety data sheet. The next part of my presentation is on sustainability, traceability and responsibility. So these are affiliations and certifications to substantiate what a company is doing about sustainability, traceability and responsibility. And traceability is a fundamental requirement for understanding social responsibility. Hence, there is that's also a key focus for you as a requirement to understand where your ingredients come from, right back to the source of the raw material. And good documentation, measurement, and a baseline is what is needed to support the claims about improving social and environmental responsibility. So this section is about some logos and labels associated with sustainability, traceability, and responsibility. And many of these will be familiar to you. The first one is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and increasingly companies are using this as a framework for their sustainable development. And it's really recommended that you also look to this framework for your own work. Another example is the Union for Ethical Biotrade. This is a particularly linked to the sustainable use and conservation of biodiversity. Many perfume companies are actually members of the UEBT. Then we are talking about Cosmos. Cosmos is well known, maybe the market leader right now in organic and natural certification and approval. There are two levels of approval and certification. Certification applies to organic and approval applies to non-organic. There is, if you're into the fragrance and essential oil sector, there is the Sustainability Charter published by IFRA and the IOFI. Then this is a kind of a random list to keep you, it's not all necessarily linked together, but the next one I want to talk about is NatTru. NatTru is similar to Cosmos in that it provides organic and natural certification, and they also have an approval system as well. And one of the advantages of this is that you can get your information published on their databases, and you can be found by companies who are looking for natural and or natural, for example, approved ingredients. So it becomes also an opportunity to market your products using their databases. Fair for Life covers fair trade in a way that is a little bit different to the other fair trades, but it's used a lot by companies. There's the ethical aspects of Certified B as a certification. More and more companies are using this one. Fair Wild for sustainable wild collection with fair trade principles. Fair trade, so that's again social justice and paying fair prices. SEDEX is, if you refer back to that green box, that's one of the ethical affiliations. It's not a certification as such, but it's really recommended that you do SEDEX because SEDEX provides you with a really good framework for looking at the ethical credentials of your business, including your supply chain, and at the same time you get to showcase your ingredients to 60,000 companies who are also members of SEDEX, and so it also becomes a very useful promotional tool. And there are two levels. There's a self-assessment, which is quite low cost, £110 per company per year. And then once you've completed your self-assessment, you can opt for a third-party audit called a SMETA. I am recommending that many companies do take up this affiliation. Related to the United Nations Sustainable Goals is the United Nations Global Compact. Again, it's a very useful entry-level way to promote and frame and present your achievements along 10 principles that are the looking at human rights and the environment in your company and the supply chain. And then there are these two ISOs that are about natural and organic ingredients. The advantage is that these are not certifications. They are not like Cosmos and not like Natru, in the sense that you don't have to pay, apart from paying for the ISO standard, 50 or so Swiss francs, you can adopt these yourself. And increasingly, many companies are using this ISO on their websites to say, we are Cosmos approved, we are ISO 16128 certified, and we can calculate the percentage of naturalness of our substance. So it's quite a useful one. Then we have the Soil Association, very familiar, organic certification. And then the final two I'm putting in here because they're going to be coming up in the future: the European Chemicals Strategy for Sustainability and a European Green Deal. So it's worth keeping your eye on what is happening with those two aspects of those two strategies, those two plans, ambitious programs of the European Union. So yeah, this again is, these private standards cover this part of that green box. I've left out the technical part at the top, but a lot of these, when it comes to social responsible sourcing, are contained with these particular types of certification for social and environmental responsibility. And just to give us an example, I won't spend too much time on these, but this is something, so many companies are doing this. I've got here retailers like The Body Shop, fragrance companies like Givaudan, this is Lush, and then this is actually Naissance who are talking next. It's such an important part to really develop in a way that is justifiable and you can actually substantiate what you're doing. But to make these kind of claims on as part of your promotional activities, here is the European Green Deal. Next page is a company in South Africa, Orobi Oils. Here is a company in Indonesia, Mitra Ayu, a company in Nicaragua supplying sesame seed and other oils. And then also a company in India. So really across the globe, companies are taking this up. And these are obviously just examples. This is the European Commission. But it's really key to be thinking about this now as it becomes increasingly important. So it's increasingly important that you are taking actions that deal with sustainability, not just talking about it, but actually doing things. So here's an example of based on the 10 principles of the Global Compact and the 17 global goals. So for you, what is your company doing to address sustainability? What tools are you using? What are you measuring and how? What is the baseline? And so these are just a starting point to a very simple way to start to talk about what you're doing with sustainability. Now, I cannot, I have to emphasize this is a really important part now of the requirements to be a supplier to this particular industry. So I now come on to my third section before I pass on to John, how to find European buyers. This is one of the always quite a popular session, and documents on the CBI website are also very popularly often downloaded for this particular section. So basically, no matter how far away you are located from the market now, if you've got a good internet service, you can find many European buyers for your products, for your ingredients. Okay, if you've got a budget to travel to in cosmetics in Barcelona next year, that's great. You can find more buyers. At the end though, your success will depend on your own efforts. If you only contact one company a week, you cannot expect to get too many positive replies if you're contacting 50 a week, that's a whole other scale of contacts. So it depends on your efforts, your offer, your value proposition, and ultimately the interest of the European company. First point is to be systematic. Make sure you are keeping, so yeah, the research you're going to take, keep records of what you're doing, so you actually keep track. So your staff working in marketing need to be diligently, systematically keeping records of what they're doing. You can use high-tech software. It's available, of course. Many companies have software for this, but you can use an Excel spreadsheet. The next thing is to classify your research. So you'll find many companies by going onto the internet. Some are relevant for you, some are not. And the objective will be to find the most customers in the most efficient way possible. And to check whether a company is a likely customer before you contact them, or at least know exactly what their reaction might be. Know how to approach them. So here is a simple graphic to show this. So first of all, who is the company? What products do they have? Are they their own products, or are they actually supplied by a principal company? Because if they're doing that, then there might be less likely chance to change. What's their role in the chain? In other words, who are their customers? Do they sell or use what I sell? Is it the same product? Is it the same category? Or is it a different category or a different product? And then from that, you arrive at a conclusion. Is this a customer or a competitor, or both? Because it can be both. Or is there no further action required? And then this will help you determine how you present yourself to your prospective customer. Are you a new supplier? Do you have a new product? Those are two basic ways to look at that. You know, people don't get many responses, so when they write to companies. So you want to really maximize opportunities by narrowing it down and really defining well what is your pitch. In this process, if you find a company that looks like a good match, don't wait, just get in contact with them, but be prepared, well prepared in how you want to pitch. Keep an open mind about opportunities. A company that's not selling your product now, but is selling a product of a similar category might be of interest. And don't be put off in contacting big or small companies, because you just don't know if they're going to be interested. Using trade fair catalogs, of course, is a very good way to find potential buyers. For our industry, in cosmetics is a good one to go to. SCS Formulate, just a couple of weeks ago in the UK, is a very good one to look at. They've already got the data, companies are already on there for 2023. In Germany, you've got Cosmetics Business. Also, you've got BioFac, the largest organic trade fair. You can find a lot of potential customers from these lists. Then you've got also one in Italy for the natural ingredients sector, natural product sector, called Sana. Using ingredient databases is also a very good way to find out. Here, you can find out potential customers, but also the idea is put yourself on these databases so you can be found more easily. Sometimes you have to pay, sometimes the researcher pays, but they're a very good way to find out. Two good ones are Special Chem and You Are Prospector. And it's, you know, it's quite amazing. There are some companies not using these databases, and so again, I recommend that you put your names on these databases because it makes you easier to find when a researcher is looking for a new ingredient. You become more easily found. You can also search for like-minded companies on the databases of the social responsibility and ethical certifications. They are a useful source of information about potential buyers as well as competitors. So, for example, I'm going to skip on that because we're running out of time. The UEBT membership list is very interesting. Look at that. membership data list for possible customers. The Fair for Life standards got a comprehensive database. NatTrue, as I mentioned, has got a database for approved and certified materials. Equally, Cosmos has got a database for certification certified suppliers. And you can find, again, they could be potential customers or they could be competitors. And then can't really miss out the opportunity to look at sector associations. For example, Cosmetics Europe, and then you've got all these national organizations, and these four I've mentioned here publish their list of members. So you can find a lot of companies from that. Then for the essential oil sector, you've got IFRA, and then you have here 3 examples of national associations which have published the membership lists. Then you've got also EFEO and the Aromatherapy Trade Council, for example, also publish lists of members. These are all possible customers for you. And then for the whole sector, again, we've got FC, which I mentioned before, because they have got a GMP standard. And these are examples of the national associations who are affiliated to FC in the UK, in Germany, in France, Italy, Switzerland, and in Spain. These all become sources of potential customers for you. So that now completes my part of the presentation, the webinar today. I'm now going to hand over to my good friend I've known for a long time, that is John Brebner. So I'm going to manage the PowerPoint slides, and John is now going to take over with his presentation. John, over to you.
You're still muted, John. You have to put on your sound.
There, unmuted.
Yes, great, thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, whatever time zone you're in, you're very welcome, and thanks to Andrew. If you had to complete everything in that green box that Andrew was looking at, you might be thinking of finding a tall building and jumping off it, but it really isn't that bad. So some of those things you do need to get going, and others you can add to as you go along. So perspectives from a European buyer, just a tiny bit about my own background. I've been in the industry for over 40 years. Started with a major Swiss company called Givaudan, and then a long time ago started my own company, which after a good success, it got a bit too heavy for me. So I sold the business to Naissance, who I now work for, along with my daughter, as it happens, and they're about 100 people doing about 25 million turnover in euros. So yeah, quite a good outfit. To be involved is quite a major thing, and it's really rather a special industry, the essential oil, the vegetable oil, and indeed the cosmetic market. So looking through some of the things I've prepared, if on the first slide, I'll give a little bit of background, or maybe the second slide. That's the owner of the company Naissance, who started in his back bedroom, and he's now been very involved for a number of years with organic materials, especially essential oils. So on the next slide, the sort of thing we do, it's labeled our product range, but it's the sort of thing that we do and have done for a long time. I've been connected for 40 years on a few, and 10, 20 years on a number of producers, cooperatives, farming groups. And this is how I started quite some years ago, in order to be at the very root of where products come from, in order to help isolated communities in remote countries and areas of countries so that they could get their products onto the market. So just a few illustrations on the next slide. To have some of these accreditations, we've already looked at that with Andrew, so we don't need to go too carefully through that, but that's what they look like. And an NOP, the National Organic Program of the USA, is a very important one to get, as well as the EU and the Cosmos. So we'll come to that a little later on. So on the next one, again, looking at direct sources, where we have local people with local materials. And it is so important having a partnership with the people who actually grow. It's just like their children, their family. They're that close to them, and we treat it in the same way. So a couple of illustrations there, and on this one as well, with shea butter, it's still to this day produced in a very crude village way with huge vats over open fires, but the quality is tip-top, and that's always what is required. Has a great story. When I started on this project, we bought 4 boxes totaling 100 kilos, and now there are 40-foot containers being shipped, and from about 12 women in a remote part of the very north of Ghana. From those 24 women, it's now nearly 1,000 families that are supporting or supported by this project. So that's great, it's lovely, good for them, good for me, and good for everybody involved. So it helps us all sleep a bit better at night. So on the next slide, another illustration. Moringa oil coming from Kenya. Again, it's a very major project now. It was small, but it has expanded and it's grown. And as it says, it's a women's cooperative working in a different way. That is to say, it's not a big factory with people doing a mind-numbing job. They're real people with a real product. And on the next one, Rwanda, it's the same. This is a women's cooperative. Again, it started as a women's project, but it's got so big, it employs whole families, men and women. And it started off after that appalling war that went out between the 2 main tribes in Rwanda. And it was the widows that were left, and they had nothing to support them. So the project was started, and now it's brilliant. It's a major project, which is lovely. Again, very, very satisfying, getting a top product, quality, good pricing. So, and the next. This is an Aboriginal project. I'm showing you these because this is the sort of thing that I'm guessing that a number of you looking have got as well. You're not in big factories or whatever. So this is a sandalwood, certified organic. It's for the Aboriginal people in the west of Australia. And it's a huge, huge project, which originally didn't involve the Aboriginal people at all. Now it does, very much so. And they've had the skill for decades to use it locally. And now we and others are able to offer it on a global scale to international companies. So again, good for everyone involved. Moving on to the next. Just to give an indication of the sort of packaging in raw material that you will need to have access to, and I'm sure that there are a lot of ways of finding out where you can obtain packaging, not knowing where you're located, but from a 250 aluminium all the way up to actually a 5 kilo aluminium, and then the big drums and so on, and then the IBCs holding 9 to 1,000 kilos. So if that's normally vegetable oils, if you can supply a ton of organic rose oil, I'm very interested, and I'm sure you would be as well. So again, on the next slide is the sort of documentation that we generally need. These are like basics. Andrew's gone into detail. You have to have a certificate of analysis, and you have to have a specification. The specification and the analysis has to be done at a laboratory. If you don't have a laboratory, then you must have access to a university or a governmental institution that will carry this out for you. And it's just a typical appearance of color, the specific gravity index, optical rotation, and your spec will then be firm. You provide that. So if somebody buys something from you, you send them a certificate of a C of A, certificate of analysis, which I think is the next slide, possibly. If not, the certificate of analysis, there we are, in reverse. The certificate of analysis must conform to the specification, otherwise it'll be rejected. Okay, so moving along. The safety data sheet is again an absolute requirement. This can be anything from 3 to 10 pages according to what the oil or the ingredient is composed of. It does take a lot of doing, but like the specification, the SDS, the safety data sheet, is a one-off. So once you've done it, you've done it. You don't need to do it again unless there's some major change that comes along. Okay. The IFRA statement is also a requirement on the next slide, hopefully. And then there's the International Fragrance Association. We might be talking food, but the Fragrance Association, the IFRA, is a requirement across the board. And what you have to produce on that is the list and uses and safe levels for use in cosmetics. So many companies produce both flavors and fragrances, so they will be supplying cosmetic companies and food companies. So it's one of those things that we have to have. The next one, a declaration of allergens, the D of A, as Andrew alluded to, there are so many allergens at the moment, and the EU are trying to get another 30 listed, but they are in nearly every product. Frankincense is one that comes to my mind, that is probably one of the very few oils that does not have any allergens in it. There are one or two others, but they are very few. Excuse me. Moving on to organic certification. I've been involved with organic materials for nearly 40 years now, and it's a new market. When I started, it was a tiny market, slightly eccentric, but now it's a major market. It's tens of billions in value around the world. So having an organic material certified, and if you have it NOP, the National Organic Program of the USA, as I referred to earlier, then it opens up another market, a very big, important, and still growing market. So it's very key, where you can, to have organic certification. Cosmos is a good starting point. Cosmos is accepted in many countries, and what it also does, and a very important thing, is traceability. Traceability is demanded more and more for a requirement, because companies want to have a marketing tool, something different to say, and also the consumer, where they used to just pick off the shelf, that used it for years, now the new generation, they're looking at the back. They want to know what chemicals are in there, if any. What do they do? Why are they in there? Why is it a chemical? So more and more consumers are looking at the labels and wanting to see the word natural or organic. So that plus traceability is important. The other important thing that you need will be a sample of whatever product that you are producing, whether it's a herb or a vegetable oil or an essential oil. And for an essential oil, a 10 ml sample. For a vegetable oil, normally 100 ml sample is required. And with that, you must accompany it with the certificate of analysis, so that we can compare with the spec, or the customer can compare the spec with the C of A. Then they test it themselves to make sure that it conforms and that it meets the requirements on everything from the aroma all the way through to the various chemical breakdown. So the other thing that we need to look at carefully after the GC, oh, just go back a bit, go back one, certificates of analysis should, if you can, get a GC, a gas chromatograph readout analysis. More and more major companies are requiring this. Also, there's a lot of competition out there, and therefore pricing per kilo is key. And it needs to be not just think of a figure and add 50%. It needs to be done very carefully so that the producer is not doing himself out and then disappearing because he didn't make enough margin. And it has to be competitive for the end user. Now, shipping costs are at the moment horrendous, where it used to be 3 years ago, 2 years ago, just before COVID, you could send a 20-foot container from Europe to America for about $1,500. Now it's about $20,000. So scale that back to even putting a stamp on an envelope or putting a jiffy bag in the post or through DHL, the cost is now significant. So with the shipping costs relating to samples, it isn't an on cost. It might cost $100. It might cost a bit more than that. So it's not something that you can just throw out 20 or 30 times and only get one order. So what we have found that works very well, if people are serious, they'll pay for what they want. So if you say, look, it's going to cost us $100, whatever the cost is, you say, look, we're happy to send you a sample. The sample will be at our expense, but the cost of getting it to you is too much. So if you take the sample, pay us, or pay us and take the sample, better way around, we will then refund that by a reduction on the first commercial order. They get the sample, they approve it, they say, thank you very much. Here's an order for 25 kilos or 100 kilos. So your $100 comes off that invoice. that means they're serious. Okay. So the other important thing is lead time. Don't say a week and it comes in a month's time. Much, much better to say we can get it to you in a month and it's there in a week. Everyone thinks you're absolutely wonderful then, but the other way around, it really doesn't work. It's not a case of what does the customer want to hear, it's what is reality. And if you say 4 weeks and you can do it in 1 or 2, then happy days, but you have to allow for the unforeseen. The other major aspect is continuity of supply. Can you continue to supply that 250 kilos of X if you are able to? If you're not, then you need to program. You also need to contract. Contracting is a very strong thing to be able to do. So just thinking of that, forecasts, don't overpromise, and continuity of supply, you need to be very useful on that. So I think then that this one is, I know it's grain and rice, but it gives an idea of the slow improvement. So over a 3, 4, 5 year period as to how anything, whether you're producing lemongrass or basil or sandalwood or anything else, you need to know that you start on the left and you work up to the right, and you tell your customer that that's how life is. It's a real living product. It's not a chemical coming out of a factory. And you're open to the elements, drought, pesticide, disease, flood, you name it. I've been involved with all of those in various parts of the world. So I think that the other aspect, finally, is HazChem. Many of our products in the natural world are classified as hazardous materials. So as a result of that, they get extra shipping costs. So even a sample, a 10 ml sample, because it's hazardous, you have to declare it. And in Europe, many parts of Europe, you have to have a qualified driver to collect or deliver. So you get, comes from you, comes into Europe, into the UK, and then a qualified driver has to, who's been trained in hazardous materials, has to pick it up or deliver it, whichever. And I guess that he knows how to handle a fire extinguisher or something. So it's important to know that. But the other thing is, finally, how are people treated? If you have a cooperative, it's important that the people are treated properly. Do they benefit? What sort of facilities do they have? What are the mutual benefits of the people who have their fingers in the ground all the way through to the pickers, to the packers, to the truck loaders, to the truck drivers? Everybody has to benefit, and that has to be provable. In the past, I've had major companies like L'Oreal, like Aveda, come through and visit various projects in India, Papua New Guinea, South Africa, and they have wanted to see firsthand that everybody is benefiting. And as thus, they then can use that for their own, as an own marketing tool. So that really summarizes what I have to say. And I just wish all of you great success. Handing back to Andrew.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Yeah, handing over to Thomas now.
Thomas, there we are.
Yes, we're to the final part of this this webinar, which are the answering of the questions. There has been some interesting questions, so I will read them out. And the first questions, they were asked, Andrew, at the time that you were talking about REACH. So one question is, if a plant extract is prohibited substance traces in it, how can we use this plant product?
Okay, so if a plant extract has a prohibited...
If a plant extract has prohibited substance traces in it.
So then it's a really good question. Okay,
can we still use...
remove the prohibited substance from the extract, or is it actually an inherent part of that particular extract? And again, if it is prohibited, then you have to take it out. That's the bottom line. And of course, that's what you'd have to do, or you would find a way of removing it basically from the extract.
Go ahead, John, if you have something.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that you distill, and for example, an essential oil, but some of the aspects are poisonous or hazardous, whatever, and you can redistill and take out that one element. To give a simple illustration, corn mint, a form of peppermint, has a very, very high content of menthol. And when that oil is distilled, it can contain up to 90% of menthol, which they distill out and sell separately. And it's the same with wintergreen. It has one main component and you can distill it out and you sell it. Many of the products have like D-limonene, but you can distill it out and either sell it separately where you can, or get rid of it.
Okay, thank you. And then another question about REACH.
Okay.
It says essential oils is not exempt, but then it's only applicable if you ship more than 1 metric ton, isn't it?
Per year.
Per year, yeah. So actually, so that's a detail. So if you're exporting less than, it's not exempt from REACH. The exemption refers to the hazard classification of the substance. But if the importer is only importing less than 1 ton of that particular substance, they do not have to go to the registration process. But it's actually not exempt, because if you ship more than 1 ton, then it falls within the scope of REACH. So it's a good question, because it provides the strategy for companies who don't have REACH, who haven't got like the 50,000 euros to invest in becoming an only representative. What they can do is they can look at their strategy to see, to find the buyers out there who want to buy less than 1 ton per year. And if they can find 10 such buyers, then they can sell probably up to 10 tons per year without REACH being involved in that particular, getting involved in that. I'm sure John might have also some interesting answers here as well, as he deals with this on a daily basis.
Well, I think you've covered it well, Andrew. If you are, as a company, importing, say, 900 kilos over a period of 12 months, you as a company don't need to register. But then that could limit you. If your end customer says, next year we're going to need 1,500 kilos, then you're stymied. You either have to let them down, or you have to register that particular ingredient and bite the bullet.
Exactly. Great. Thanks, John. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you. There's a question. You both talked about certifications for organic, and there's a question: is it true that certifications give buyers security, but at the same time they are very expensive for social enterprises that are just starting out and that help populations that need to improve their quality of life by marketing their natural products? Is there an alternative to certifications?
Let's ask. Go, John. You go for that one, John, first.
Well, the certification is the end result of what you have done. So you've grown everything purely. You've not added any chemicals, anything that have come out of a factory. You're using natural, mature horse manure or camel manure or whatever it is to aid the growth. But if you want to have it organically certified and say that, then you have to have the audit. It's not that expensive initially. Many of the major companies around the world, they do understand that for a new startup, it is quite a lot. I mean, I don't know what the price is today, but it might be, say, $2,000 to $3,000. Now, to some, that would be a fortune and beyond their reach. But it's, if you can, you get a premium price, which I didn't mention before, but you get a premium price. If you've got a lemongrass standard, your organic version would demand or command a 20% premium. So you do get the payback.
If I can then add to that, so that deals with organic, and that's perfect. With regard to other types of certification, let's say social type, ethical type certifications, then you can go so far doing it yourself, yeah, provided you are sort of looking at a baseline, that you're measuring what you're doing, that you have clear objectives. But at the end of the day, it's companies, buyers need more security in that, as you put in your question. So that's where, for example, CEDEX is really a low-cost option. For 110, I don't work for CEDEX, but I happen to know this information, for £110 per year, you can get access to this platform and you can complete their ethical questionnaire. And then at a certain point, you can publish your ethical questionnaire to the other members of CEDEX. And that is a really good starting point. Or it's for your social type of, your journey along ethical responsibility, ethical sourcing, responsible sourcing.
I think to add to that, if I may, that we have many suppliers from different countries who offer organic material, but they are just stating that it is organic. They don't have any proof of that. And if you're supplying to a major company, the body shop that you mentioned earlier, if you don't have the documentation that gives them the proof, along with traceability, sustainability, everything else, then you can call it what you like, but it won't be documented as organic, and therefore you won't get the premium price.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question, is there a difference in market approach between producers in Francophone and English-speaking countries?
In a way, well, the market requirements for Europe are the same. So in that sense, you're organising your supply in order to meet the expectations of companies like Naissance and other companies. And so one thing is, so Francophone and English speaking, it's not necessarily an obligation to have English, of course, but in order to be able to target most of all the countries that are in Europe, having sort of English-speaking people as well as French-speaking people, of course, is also important. I'd say that's one thing. Having it's a fact of life that having English as well is going to help you target more and more markets. But in terms of the objective of what you're looking to do, it doesn't matter whether you're from Francophone or English-speaking countries. It's the same requirements and expectations that buyers will have of you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question from John. Would a company like Nations assist in obtaining various certifications for an uncertified company in order to secure large-scale production of an oil from them?
Good question. It's something we've done in the past in order to help them to get going. Yes, it's something we would consider. That's not an unequivocal yes, of course, you know, bring it on. It's a case of case by case, and we'll look at it and we'll see if it's something that we have an interest in or not, or whether it can benefit both parties.
Okay, thank you. Here a question, do you consider onboarding your suppliers into a collaborative digital platform and trace together the ingredients and proofs to the source?
Do you consider onboarding your suppliers into a collaborative digital platform and trace together the ingredients?
Like a cooperative, you mean? I mean, that's something we've encouraged as a cooperative. We get a group of farmers will pool their resources, and instead of 1 by 25 drum, they've got 10 by 25 drums. And then you quality control each of those 25 drums, and then you put it collectively into a 200 kilo drum, whatever, and then you quality control that, and then you produce your spec accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question. I will take the first part of this question. The question is, does CBI have any database of potential buyers in Europe or the UK? And so I'll start the question. We get this question a lot at CBI, and we do not have a database of potential buyers and not a list of buyers that you can contact. Of course, we have many contacts with European importers, but we do not have that list available because if you look at our study, finding buyers in natural ingredients for cosmetics or finding buyers in natural food additives, there you find you need to get your own list based on your product, based on the size of your company. They're all so we help you with that study to make your own list, and I think that's important because otherwise it's just yeah, you need to find a match with a potential buyer. And the other part of the question is, will John or Andrew be of help in identifying buyers?
That's a tricky one. From my point of view, I mean, we'd be then saying, you know, here's a list of our competitors.
Yes.
So that would be a little bit difficult to do. But what I would strongly recommend, as Andrew spoke of earlier, is attending some of these European trade shows, SANA, BioFac, and others, because there you will meet an awful lot of potential buyers. And the other thing I would suggest is, as we've done in the past with various organizations, is to encourage them to go to their own government and see if there is a government marquee, whatever, at these trade shows. And very often you get a Ghanaian one, and you get one from Togo, you get a South African, and though under that umbrella you have a stand of your own within your country's umbrella.
Then just to add on to that, what you've said, John, and also Thomas, well, like Thomas said, there is these documents on CBI's website, and what I presented today is typical of what you can find in those websites. So there are, you go look at sector associations, you look at trade fair catalogs, you look at these different ingredient marketing databases, and you do your own classification of what's right for you, what's appropriate for you to select your companies. And but you really need to be thinking about, I've been doing this for a long time now, for some time, and I think a figure I have in my mind is that when you can start talking to like 400 or more potential buyers, then you start to generate opportunities for your business. So, but to find 400 buyers, yeah, you could go to 2 trade fairs and maybe you can meet 200 people, or you could also look at sector associations. Of course, the difference is that one is like actively meeting people face to face, which is always much more kind of interesting and exciting and can give you a better return. But that's why the trade fairs are expensive. Like in cosmetics, it's an expensive trade fair to go to, whereas writing or calling companies is a bit more of a hard slog. But you'll find a lot of these tips in the CBI documentation on their market intelligence sections of their website.
Thank you. So we're already out of time, but let's do a few more questions, and then we'll have to close this session.
Okay.
This is it says a sourcing a buyer question. Do buyers prefer to conduct business directly with producers, or is there scope for a middleman? If so, what is the best way the middleman can protect himself?
John, go for it, John.
Well, it's because of international trade fairs and others. 20 years ago, there were few, if any, middlemen. 10 years ago, there were a lot more. Today, there are many, many, many more. In many ways, we are a middleman, because although we have a wide range of retail products, we do supply other companies in bulk. So anything, up to tonnage for whatever the ingredient is. So many of the major companies, the big boys, the Unilevers and the Estee Lauders and whoever's, they would never, hardly ever buy from a small group. They would nominate a middleman, and that middleman would supply maybe 20 or 30 companies products, so that the Estee Lauders and L'Oreal's, they have only one company, one invoice, rather than 20 or 30. That's how the major players work. Going down the scale, then different ones like Lush and Body Shop and Neal's Yard, then yes, they would work directly with a cooperative, not a farmer who can produce 20 kilos. That's not economical for either party. But yeah, that they can certainly work through a cooperative foreman or manager, somebody who is nominated to pull together maybe 10, 20, 30 small farms and have it sold collectively.
I think that's great, John. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. Yeah.
Okay. Last question.
Okay.
It's from a producer from Burkina Faso. I want to know if you have some advice about the mango nuts process to get oil, because in our company we produce and transform a lot of mango, but the nut is not exploited.
It's a specialized business and specialized equipment. Two alternatives pop into my head. One is that you supply the nuts to a company who processes them. The other is to find a local processor who has that very heavy, it's a massive pressure of about 25 tons that is pushed onto the nuts to extract the oil. And if you've got 25 tons on you, believe me, you give up every last drop. So if you have a company in Burkina Faso or next door neighbors that can do that for you, that would be my suggestion, to find somebody who's got the kit.
Yes, yeah, I know. Because you can produce mango butter from it, and mango butter is in high demand in Europe nowadays.
Yep.
Yes.
There's a company in Holland who do that. They process a lot of nuts just north of Amsterdam.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are technical challenges to extracting butter from mango kernels. Like John said, it requires a heavy-duty expeller because there isn't actually a lot of oil, or in fact, it comes out as a butter in those particular seeds. And so that is a technical requirement. At the same time, as Thomas alluded to, I mean, mango butter is a kind of a high-value alternative to shea butter, and so shea butter is now widely available in so many cosmetic products, because not only is it a fantastic butter that really does an amazing job on the skin, but it's also very, how should I say, very keenly priced. And so therefore companies can use lots of it in their cosmetic products. Mango butter is a different product. It's more expensive, but it has similar amazing properties on the skin. And so for companies who are looking at an alternative to shea butter, looking to differentiate themselves from using shea butter, they can look at using mango butter. But the challenge is actually getting it out of the kernel. And so it is an expelling process, or you have to dry the kernel as well to reduce the moisture content of it. There are some technical challenges involved, but it is, at the end of the day, and there aren't very many suppliers of this product around the world, but it is an interesting butter to use in cosmetics, certainly.
Okay,
well,
there
is sorry, Thomas, there is a company that we work with in the region of Wa in the north of Ghana, which is not a million miles from Burkina Faso, depending on where they are in the country. But somebody, and there are shea butter producers in Burkina Faso itself, so they might look at an alternative source of income, that they would charge so much to crush the nuts to get the oil, produce the butter, and they're already making butter from the shea nut, so that there are options not that far away.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to end this webinar. Thank you all for joining today, and I hope it has been interesting for you, and it will help your business. Last thing for me to say is please visit our website, cbi.eu/market information, and go to the sector natural ingredients for cosmetics, and you find all kind of interesting studies. Also studies about products like mango butter, like essential oils. So please do. And if you have questions about those studies, you can contact us as well.